Hello, welcome to week 5 of MPAI 600 here at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies Applied Intelligence Program. I'm doing this a little bit early today just because, or earlier this week, because I want to give guidance for the paper that's due next week. So you have a foundation of what you're looking for to write. So, watch this earlier than usual so you can start your process for writing the paper. So announcements, again, the terrain walk is November 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is the Capitol Hill Terrain Walk, and I'll talk about that in a second. And then I'll send Zoom videos, the Zoom link and videos in a separate announcement so you can access it. When I say videos, I'm going to have the people who are on site actually watch the videos on their iPhones so you can watch them on your computers as we do the terrain walk. So it's as if we're the insurrectionists, and we'll actually kind of red team, what could have been done, what couldn't have been done, how security gaps were exploited. So we'll have a good night, or look good. I don't think anyone. Well, let me get to that in a second, actually. And then the paper and briefing is due November 12th. As a reminder, if you're in groups 1 or 2 and 3, you're doing a group briefing. You're doing a group briefing. You can do it on Zoom. You can do it on YouTube. You can do it on VoiceThread, whatever platform you want. Just make sure I can access it. Everyone else, groups 4, 5, and 6, you're doing individual papers, and then you will swap at the end of the semester those roles. So again, this is what we're going to do. What I would recommend, so we're meeting at 8 p.m. at the Grant Memorial here. What I would recommend, I don't think anybody's said they were going to actually show up in person. If you are, we're meeting at the Grant Memorial. 8:30, we're going to be at the Peace Monument. 8:30 to 9, or about 9 o'clock, we'll be at the base. And if we have time, I don't think we'll have time, but if we do, we'll go to the back side of the Capitol. What I think it'd be good if you are watching this is to have this Google Maps and Google Street View up along with the Zoom so you can follow along and kind of trace the path that we're doing. So Google Maps, Google Street View, that'll make the experience much better. So week 4 review. Again, Iraq WMD, we saw failures throughout, as many of you mentioned, throughout the process. Failures in collection, particularly the Curveball documentary that you all watched, and the reliance on bad human. We saw failures in analysis, whether that was the groupthink surrounding the nuclear centrifuge tubes, whether it was the lack of negative evidence, not asking, if Saddam has a WMD program, why are we not seeing X, Y, and Z? Those were all analytical failures. Organizational failures, arguably, there might have been alternative views and different aspects, but if George Tenet, the director of the CIA at the time, says there's Iraq WMD, well, that's what the policymakers are going to hear. You could also look at the certain information was circumvented through the circumvented the intelligence process and made it directly to policymakers. That was brought up in the Maddow documentary. That's an organizational failure. And then finally, the policy interface. That was really outlined in the Maddow documentary, that assessments, if not altered, were at least produced in a way that was likable to policymakers' original thoughts. And as you saw, again, there might not have been some, rewrite this or do this over again, but there might have been some prompting to come up with the right assessment. And from the analytical perspective, you want your work to be read. You want your briefings to be taken. If you want your work to be read, then make sure it conforms to what the policymaker wants to hear. I mean, that's the bottom line. So you saw that kind of policy interface that was really, really corrupted. And then 9/11, again, I asked, was 9/11 an intelligence failure? And again, as I said, the fact that we knew about Hamzar and Midar, those two Al Qaeda operatives that were talking back to a safe house in Yemen that had a visa, that were on a watch list, yet we couldn't action our government to stop 9/11. I think is the intelligence failure. Again, what did Bin Laden determine to attack the U.S.? You all saw that briefing. Again, I think there's a lot of blame on Bush administration from that, but I think that analysis is too vague to actually have been effective, right? There's no time, place. So the question is, what could have been done based on that analysis? And that'd be a great, or based on that vague analysis, and that'd be a great topic to write about in your paper. Organizational issues. Again, the NSA documentary brings this up. There was information collected by the NSA, but it wasn't disseminated down to people that could have made a difference. Why? What were the issues with that? And then finally, as you think through 9/11, where could it have been stopped? Where along the chain could there have been stopgaps to ensure that 9/11 didn't happen? Where along that information chain, where along the excuse me, where along where along the process could that have happened that would have been more effective? So just thoughts going forward for Iraq WMD 9/11. And then as we talked about paper 2, again, I just want to give some guidance. So listen carefully, take notes if you need to, but you have strategic paper. So focus on the case studies we talked about here. If you want to do a case study outside, let me know like ASAP. I'm okay with that as long as it's not too obscure and abstract. But I've had people talk about the Tet Offensive and other case studies as well. Again, let me know if you're going to talk about that. I will also allow, I don't have this in the paper or in the guidance, but if you want to choose a particular issue, like organizational theory or groupthink or negative evidence, and show how it weaved through multiple case studies, you are welcome to do that. I will allow you to do that as well. So you can do it on one case study, or you can do it on multiple case studies with a particular issue emphasis. What I do want you to do is focus. Focus on the paper or one or two topics. Do not go into detail on multiple issues. I don't want 15 reasons why 9/11 happened. I don't want 15 reasons why the Iraq WMD happened. Choose what you thought was the primary failure and back it up with specific evidence. I can't say that enough. I do not want, here's all the collection failures, here's all the analytical failures, here's all the organizational failures. Choose one of those issues. And some of the issues that we're talking about, again, don't list them out like I'm doing it here. Choose one. And I'm just doing this to get your mind to start thinking. So you can talk about failures in collection. Again, the Pearl Harbor, the aircraft carriers, then the lack of knowledge on them. That is a failure in collection. The Yom Kippur War, the over-reliance on Marwan, as some of you wrote. That's a collection failure. And then as I mentioned, the Iraq WMD, over-reliance on curveball or lack of inspectors or other lack of collection was a contributing factor to the failure in the Iraq WMD case study. Failures in analysis. Again, Pearl Harbor, as I discussed a couple of weeks ago, the groupthink and the improper intelligence assessment, racist assessments on the Japanese capabilities was a failure in analysis. The confessions went into detail about groupthink, about negative evidence, about vividness bias, particularly with the confessions being played in court. That's a failure analysis. And as I mentioned, Iraq WMD, groupthink and negative evidence were failures in analysis that contributed to the Iraq WMD failure. Politicization on the policy interface, Iraq WMD, again, I talked about this. The confessions, obviously there was political pressure to get convictions, which probably corrupted the Detective Ford and the police analysis around those, the Norfolk 4. And then 9/11, I just talked about how it was communicated to policymakers that could have made a decision. I just talked about it, and the doll goes into detail on that. And then finally, organizational theory. Again, 9/11, you can make the argument 9/11 was an organizational failure because of we had information in one part of our government, but we didn't share it with the people that mattered most, that could have actually taken action. That's an organizational failure. At the federal level, Pearl Harbor, information was collected in the Washington-based intelligence system at the time, but it was not disseminated down to the commanders on the ground. Arguably, they should have had that information, and if they had that information, they would have taken mitigating circumstances. And then finally, the fusion centers that talk about the integration of information vertically. One thing you have to say in your paper, you have to say this is, okay, if the intelligence had been correct, what actions should have the policymaker have taken to mitigate risk? Whether you're talking about Yom Kippur War, Pearl Harbor, 9/11, etc. This piece of intelligence was ignored, but if it wasn't ignored, it would have led to actions X, Y, and Z that would have mitigated risk. You will not get full credit if you do not discuss that in your paper. Okay, so if there's questions or issues, let me know. You can call me directly if there's problems. I'm usually responsive on email as well, but just please, again, narrow your paper. Don't just give me a laundry list and tell me what mitigating circumstances could have been implemented based on the intelligence. And then unfortunately, we don't have any breaks in this class. It's an 8-week class, so we have to talk about the counterterrorism case studies. We go right into it. So we go about Fort Hood, underwear bomber, Boston, and the EU. And you have 2 readings about the Fort Hood shooting, the Boston Marathon bombing, and 2 documentaries, all very good documentaries. And the question to think about as you're going through these case studies is, why do we still have these failures? Despite the billions, trillions, depending on how you count it, dollars invested, why do we still have these problems? Why haven't we solved it despite all the post 9/11 reforms that we've done? So I look forward to your discussions for this week. I will look forward to any questions that you might have, and I look forward to seeing many of you on Monday at 8 o'clock.